Hi guys, this episode is going to be about LARP Hots and Knots. Now you might be asking what LARP is and what on earth are Hots and Knots. Well, firstly, LARP or live action roleplay is a hobby that I indulge in, and there was a LARP intro episode on the channel featuring MakingLARP, my wife. Now I'm not going to go into a huge explanation into the nitty-gritty of LARP. Becca does a fairly excellent job of it on her channel, and I'll put links for particular episodes which I think might be useful for anyone looking to get into LARP. But for me, basically, it's sort of like, think of it as a festival with lots of different costumes, lots of mead, lots of fighting and lots of plot. It's a very interesting hobby, to say the least. Now I've been doing LARP for just under 4 years now in terms of event LARP, and the only system I've ever played is Lorien Trust. So what do I actually mean by Hots and Knots? Well, in my faction certainly, a couple of days after a particular event, there'll be loads of people posting on Facebook, on the notes or on their blogs about all the positive and negative aspects of that event that they've enjoyed or not enjoyed. And you'll actually find some people will post in character the Hots and Knots and out of character Hots and Knots. I tend to do that as well, because let's face it, there might be some things that happen to your character that are really crap, and they might still actually be really good for you as a player because it can give you really good roleplay. Now I've done a few Hots and Knots in my time now. The last one I did was for the GEF, and I'm not going to list all of the Hots and Knots, all the details from all of the reports I did. What I'm going to do in this video is basically give you an overview of basically the most common Hots and Knots I've found throughout all of the events. What I'll probably do is either put it on the page as notes, or I'll post on the Dungeons and Drinking blog. So I'm going to move on to talk about my generic knots that I tend to find are quite common for quite a lot of players, and certainly for me I found them come up more and more often, unfortunately. First one is always going to be the one that really sticks in my mind, is the weather. My first LT event was a spring moot where it was -5 I think at one point, and I got to the point where I had to spend 2 nights in a hotel. Also, the event that just came, the GEF, was absolutely raining all the freaking time. We weren't as bad as Empire, mind, but basically it was just muddy and it was awful, and everyone was just wet. It made me really miserable. The GEF is more of a social event than the other events that Lorien Trust do for mainlines, and I'd never done it before, and I was really I couldn't be asked to join in any of the social games or anything like that because it was just always wet and cold. My second knot is pretty much adjusting to the noise and the amount of people that there are there. Mainly because I'm not the most extroverted person, and I'm quite a socially awkward person anyway, but I kind of experienced it as truly a culture shock. You know, you kind of try and imagine being in a field with 3,000 people, but it doesn't really hit you until you get there. My third knot is alcohol. Now LARP is a hobby where quite a lot of people go there and they do have a fair bit to drink, and we actually run an in-character pub, so technically this should be a hot, and in many ways it is. My first reason for it being a knot is that I have encountered fights as a monster where you've gone on a night fight against a camp and they have been absolutely wasted to the point where they shouldn't have been fighting, and people have been injured as a result of people being too drunk. My second reason for it is that there are inevitably players who do drink a bit too much and then get themselves into trouble. Now I know one of them. He's currently serving a ban. I'm not going to talk about it in detail because he is actually a close personal friend, and he did get kicked in the arse by me for doing it. But I think that kind of highlights the issue. Certainly with LARP you kind of tend to forget like to actually drink proper fluids and eat proper food, and you kind of tend to drink a little bit too much, which sort of leads on to my sort of third reason, is that I tend to be that person who drinks a bit too much. I got quite horrendously drunk at the Geth. I was a complete douchebag. It made me really reconsider the whole aspect of drinking at LARP, really. The lesson really for that one is, if you are going to drink at LARP, at least make sure you're drinking safely. You're not going to go into combat if you're drunk, and you know your limits. If you go past that limit, then you know you're screwed, really. Another really big not for me is either a combination of unpulled blows and unsafe fighting. Now, unsafe fighting can obviously fall into the category of people being too drunk, but it also involves a lot of night fighting in general, because when people are fighting at night, you can't see so well. You tend to get a little bit more scared because they're going to throw out monsters at you and you don't really know what's going on, and you start to worry about your character surviving, and you start to hit a little bit too hard. Now, in the nighttime fighting anyway, people's weapons do tend to get a bit colder, and when latex weapons are colder, they get harder. Now, I've done quite a few night fights as a monster, and we're always told before you go into combat, make sure you're trying to warm up your weapon, you know, try and make sure they're as soft as you possibly can get them, because it will hurt. However, I don't think this is something that is ever really going to change. As for the unpulled blows issue, however, I have a serious issue with polearms. Now, I can probably legitimately say I have never been injured so much in all my life than when I've been hit by a bloody polearm. It's got to the point where I'm actually having to physically stop myself out of character from going into a fight with someone, because I seriously doubt their competency with a polearm. Now, it turns out that LT actually has a form of competency test for polearms in the manual, and normally there's certain weapons that do need you to pass a competency test to wield them, like a bow. You have to be able to show that you can use it safely to be able to wield it, and I actually believe this should happen with polearms. In the last event that I was in, I was knocked out by one, and the unsafe fighting thing came into play as well, because after I apparently went down like a sack of potatoes, they kept hitting me even though people were screaming the out of character call of man down to signify that someone was actually injured. My final knot is about out of character and in character conversations, and how they tend to kind of switch over a lot in LT. To be honest, at times I do tend to switch to out of character if I need to explain something, but you know, the general guidelines are to pretty much try and stay in character as much as possible if you're in an in character area. However, there are people who flagrantly tend to flout that guideline all the time, and I've had quite a few really deep conversations with people where I've actually been interrupted by an out of character comment by people, which really ruined it. I think especially in our in character pub, which tends to be sort of an icy-ish area for some people, it's really difficult sometimes to tell if people are being in character or out of character, and well, there's signs for it. If you're out of character, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to put your finger up in the air and signify that you're out of character. People don't do that though, and that's really annoying. Anyway, I've winded up. I want to talk about the HOTS. First one for me actually is linked to the crowds and the huge amount of people. You do get to meet a lot of new people, and I've made a lot of new friends from LARP. I think for me it was a case of trying to adjust to the kind of sheer scale of the events, and I'm fine with it now, but certainly it helped that I had the small group that we started with as the company Brave and Foolish that were living in the lines, and obviously you do have 10 different factions, and now I'm actually able to travel to different factions on the field and be known by them, and actually have new friends in different factions as a result of meeting them. I'd just like also say how helpful people are as well. I always worried, and I do worry with a fair few role-playing games, that there is a sort of elitism and cliques amongst people. You know, you have the established veteran players and the newbies, and I'm not someone who has spent a lot of time LARPing. I found it quite intimidating actually, but there were a lot of people, especially in the lines, and I can't I can't really praise them enough for this. They were really helpful. If I did have questions about rules, about background, things like that, they were really, really enthusiastic about helping people. And I don't know if that's just the Lions as a faction or it is LT in general, but it was really nice to see that they were making a concerted effort to help newbies. Second point for me really is the level of roleplay that I've got to enjoy. As I said, LT is not the most immersive of systems, but the experiences that I've had with LT, and that might be due to the players that I've interacted with rather than the system, I don't know, but it's created some incredible moments for me. I got to participate in a ceremonial rite at the spring moot, which for me was incredibly emotional and kind of reverential as well, was beyond kind of sacred to my character, and it was at a turning point where my character didn't really know what she truly wanted to do, and then she decided, I want to do this right to become the leader of this little order thing. And yeah, I think kudos to those who all participated in that, because that made it truly special for me, so thank you. I've also had some incredible moments with the company and with friends of the company. Specifically, we have a certain dwarf who happens to be my character's adopted sister, who tried to take me someplace at the Geth, and that kind of turned out interestingly well, didn't it, Aria? I also have another adopted sister who is a fae, who was played by Amy, and I ended up saving her life at the Geth, and I think this was after the incident with Aria, where I might have been slightly drunk and she certainly was drunk too, and we I certainly ended up bursting into tears as my character, and pretty much saying things that I didn't realise my character truly felt until then. Another really, really, really big hop for me, and certainly for Becca and people in our group, is that we've had the opportunity to make our own kit. Matt was very kind enough to make my armour for me, and I made my helmet. And Mark and Lindsay, I believe, made my greaves that I end up buying off them, and I've made pouches, spell card holders, sword frogs. It's really been good to learn these different skills. And as a result, we've also made our own alcohol, which is, this is partly how this channel came about in the first place. Now, another thing that I really like about LARP is our post-LARP carvery. This is a bit of tradition now for us, because we get a lift down with one of our mates, and after we've packed all our tents, all our kit, and helped the faction clear up as much as we can, we go down to the nearest Toby carvery and we get absolutely mountains of food. But more than the food, it's the opportunity to meet people up after the event, and we tend to just stay there for a couple of hours, chill out after packing everything. It would have been the day where we've had the big final battle, so we're probably knackered anyway, so we need to recharge our batteries before we drive back up north. My final hot is about monstering and its rewards. Now, I think with monstering, people either love this or hate it. There is a faction slot each event where people go and do a couple of hours. They don't have to do combat roles, they can help doing set up with makeup, equipment, things like that, and you get paid a certain amount of gold, or you can collect stamps on a loyalty card and then hand those in later when you're done to get the gold, or XP. If you hand in one of the loyalty cards, you'll get, I think it's 1 gold or 1 XP, what we call OSPs. Now, during the first few events that I've been to, right up to the spring moot of this year, I did do quite a bit of monstering. I got ribbed about it a lot. The reason is because I didn't really buy into the whole stamps on the card thing until the summer moot of last year, and I handed in, I think, about 5. And the thing about the loyalty cards is, on the last day of each event, they will pick a certain number of these cards and they'll win prizes. At the summer moot, I won 3rd prize, which was a set of crafted armour. So I basically got an extra armour point. And then I got to the gathering, which was a couple of weeks after that, and I put in 1. It should be noted that at the Summer Moot and Gathering I actually didn't do half as much monstering as I'd done before, because actually I was spending too much time being hassled as my character that I didn't have any time to go monstering. And at the Gathering I won first place, which is the one that they call Make-A-Wish. Now I've actually had people compliment on me on this one for quite some time now, because you know, if you get the opportunity to make a wish for your character and basically have that added to your card, which is your, you know, your character card, basically who your character is, you probably aim for something quite high. And throughout the Gathering, for most of the year, my character has been seeking to become a paladin. And at the Gathering, on the first night, my prospective mentor, who agreed to put me through a trial, got killed. And then another paladin got killed. And it's very hard to create paladins, I should add. You know, not only do you have to basically spend something of yourself to create one, that person, the paladin who gets created, has to spend a year basically being screwed over and more likely to get killed as a result. So it's hard. And so on the Monday, when they said, oh, you've won, I said straight away, can I be a paladin and avoid all of the curse of the first year, because I've gone through far too much to have anything else. Now LT were quite awesome about this, because they jumped me straight from having Naut to being a level 2 paladin, which would probably take 2 or 3 years at least. But yeah, the moral of the story is that if you monster and help out LT, they will reward you very handsomely. So that's my general ramblings on my Hots and Knots. I'm going to put out all the detailed Hots and Knots reports that I've done onto the blog, and I'll put links on the episode page for you to have a look at. If anyone watching this who are Lions or other LT players have Hots and Knots that you want other people or me to have a look at, feel free to send a message or put a link on here. And thanks for watching, guys.